Now contrast these sort of statement that John Barnes said, and we're gonna explore what the NPC Piers Morgan has said in the previous days.
I mean, my God. I mean, when you hear it coming from his own mouth, it's one of the most extraordinary interviews I think I've ever heard in my life. Because there seems to be no self-awareness in Neeson of just how offensive what he's saying is.
Although there is a moment of self-awareness when he suddenly says, I'm saying this to a journalist,
well,
God forbid.
But this is a guy who's given a million interviews, right? So he knows what he's saying. He said it very deliberately. I'm going to tell you a story now. I've never told anybody. It's not an accident. He's deliberately putting it out there. But it's the indiscriminate nature of this revenge he talks about. He's not talking about revenge on the person.
On the one individual. It's holding everybody.
The black person who raped his friend. He's talking about any black person who comes
is going to be held accountable. Unbelievable.
Who he can find an excuse to kill. I mean, it is somebody, you know, the reaction on Twitter was very extreme last night, as you'd imagine, but people saying this is a career-ending interview. I've got to say, when you hear it, you don't want it to be for someone of his stature who's been, you know, never done anything like this I can remember. No. But when you actually hear him say this stuff, I think there will be genuine, fully justified outrage over what Liam Neeson said.
He says
I think when he asked what colour as the second question, for me, that's the most insidious part of it.
He says he's ashamed of his horrible behaviour.
Right.
He's trying to explain it. It's awful. I learned a lesson from it. It just leads to more revenge.
But he hasn't been...
He's trying to be open and honest. The trouble is, it's the thoughts in the first place.
Well, he hasn't been caught out. It's not like somebody's found this story and put it to him, in which case your reaction is, yeah, I'm ashamed of it, it's terrible. But he's volunteered all this. He's volunteered some unbelievably offensive... This is Liam Neeson saying, if any black person had come out of a pub, as he said, and said the wrong thing to him, he was going to kill them, murder them, simply as revenge for allegedly another black person raping his friend. Yeah. I mean, it's just staggering. Anyway.
Again, how can you misinterpret from what he said during that interview and realize the context in which this was said? And it's amazing. It's an all-white panel, and you have the clip that I showed from John Barnes. So it's outrage on behalf of another race. And how can you still not get the context when they actually play the clip and listen to what he actually said in during this show? So I don't understand how Piers can use this fake outrage, and I actually agree with it. He agrees with the so-called outrage when all Liam Neeson did was admit to him being human and saying how toxic these thoughts on revenge are, and that you shouldn't act on them. He never acted on them. He had some dark thoughts. You would be a robot if you never had any dark thoughts in your life ever. And it's such a hypocritical stance to take, because if Piers Morgan were to share his thoughts from earlier in his life, he would have just as horrible, if not more horrible thoughts than what Liam Neeson has. And this self-righteous moral high ground these people are having on this show, and I mean there is of course no opposite side of this, but there is a clip of where they have a discussion on the show, but the NPC Piers Morgan is so self-righteous that he's so much better than for Liam Neeson not doing anything really. He didn't do anything wrong. He caught himself and realized what he was doing was wrong, and he dealt with this issue. That's what all people should do. But no, let's just shame the guy for being honest for once. Jesus Christ, Piers.
I'm a very proud Irishman, as Liam Neeson is. And before I start, I want to point out that everybody has forgotten over the last 24 hours that there was a woman raped who sadly passed away, he mentioned, 5 years ago. This incident was 40 years ago. Britain was a very different place to the way it is now, similar to Ireland. I'm not making excuses for what he did.
1979.
Absolutely. What he did
I mean, hang
was
on.
wrong.
I was 14 years old then. I don't remember a Britain in 1979 which thought there was
You weren't
acceptable.
in Britain. He wasn't in Britain. He was in Ballymena. You were never in the north of Ireland, were you?
Well,
do you know the atmosphere in the north of Ireland? Do you know the way people were brought up in the north of Ireland?
Actually, yes, because I had family members who were there.
He
right?
was in a situation where people were dying on a regular basis.
Yes, but no,
and a Catholic would go out looking for a Protestant.
Fine. I do not remember when it's ever been considered remotely acceptable for a white man to prowl the streets of Northern Ireland.
It's not acceptable.
Wait. To prowl the streets of Northern for a week, not a day or an hour.
I don't think this incident happened in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
I think it happened in Britain because in Northern Ireland at the time there probably wasn't any.
Well, we don't know where it happened. He won't say, and I think he should say, right? But I don't think it's ever been considered acceptable to do this, right? Outside of Ku Klux Klan stuff in America.
Piers, of course, claims that he knows what it was like to live a life in Northern Ireland, but he doesn't. Just because you have family somewhere, it doesn't mean you know what is actually happening or how it is to live there. So it's basically a lie he tells there, and I think it's a very good context this Irish guy actually brings to this conversation, telling how times were back then. And telling how maybe the thought process and the environment that Liam Neeson was growing up in. So there was a vitriol against others and violence every day. So that is something Piers Morgan doesn't get.
Right. I mean, we know, and to say that he's not, would you say he's not racist?
I don't believe he's racist.
Okay, so
I do believe what he did and the actions and the thoughts that he did are racist thoughts. But I don't believe he is a person.
So if I have...
Sorry,
So if I have thoughts on raping a woman, does that make me not a rapist?
No, but hold on a second. If you have thoughts of rape a woman, they're very dark thoughts. If you don't,
There's
if you,
no-
but hang on.
difference
If
between
you, but if
dark
you
thoughts of
never,
killing
if
the
you
person?
never act on them, you need to get professional help.
Hang on a moment.
Whoa.
Hang on, hang on a moment.
You need to get
Because
professional
I
help.
thought Liam
Oh, but you
Neeson-
don't need professional help for...
And he
looking
did.
at-
If you listen to that interview,
I think
he
you're missing the point.
sought
But
professional help.
sorry,
I don't know who this black guy is, but there are some good points. So if you have some thoughts, you're basically a murderer. This is basically all comes down to wrong thing. If you have some issues with either men, women, people of different races, or just have violent tendencies, you should seek help. You shouldn't be bashed for this, because that is what is actually happening here. People are bashing a guy who had dark tendencies and actually sought out help to deal with these issues, but he's being labeled a racist, and I don't think he's a racist, but or what happened to him and his friend is something that made him feel this rage and didn't know how to react. So it's well said.
Did you call out Azalea Banks when she turned around and said that Irish people were being quarantined in their own country because they have a genetic gene?
Right, that was disgusting too.
Did you call her out? But is there a privilege here?
Disgusting.
All racism is disgusting. But I want to point out that Liam Neeson, over the last 24 hours, because of his honesty, this is not a gotcha moment. This is not a moment where we found out something about Liam Neeson that we didn't know before and he was trying to hide. He's come out and very honestly said this
to promote his movie. He's done it in a press junket to
we
promote
are
his
human
film.
beings. There's a very dark side to people when they suffer from depression, when they suffer from revenge, as he talks about.
Yeah.
There's dark sides to human beings. And if you look at studies in relation to human beings are 7 times more likely than any other mammal to kill each other.
This is the thing.
We are
This is it. No, but
See, this is what is ironic. So you have a situation where a black woman is calling an entire country basically inbred and being racist towards it. And when he's pointing this out, he's the one that's being called a snowflake, basically, that he's being offended, even though he says he's not to. And the double standard here. So this guy is outraged for a guy thinking thoughts in 40 years ago and never acted on them. But then you have a woman who basically is racist towards an entire country. But that is not an issue because Irish people shouldn't be outraged because of these things. And I just feel there's a double standard. So he has these arguments that black people are oppressed or anything like that. The woman actually specifically says there's Islamophobia, sexism or misogyny and racism, but there's never any racism towards white people or misandry. She actually leaves that out in her argument, and these are the one-sided argument. And none of these people living today have experienced slavery. So to use this argument that black people in Britain, in the West, are oppressed or experience so much racism is bullcrap. You have it. The best time to be a black person in history is right now. So to claim that there is so much racism and that the reason is racist is such a cop out.
This is the thing that annoys me, is that you always get people that are not of colour trying to tell black people how they should react to something that has been said. You're trying to tell us how we should feel about what... No.
But black people are telling the world how we should react to Neeson.
No. But here's the thing, because we're the ones that were called that.
Yeah.
But you just said, right, I was fair to you. You just said, was Azalea Banks called that as an Irish person? It hurt you, didn't it?
Well, I personally speaking, no, because I do a talk show and I don't get offended. I don't get offended by this. No, I'm actually surprised that Piers spent 24 hours on Twitter giving out about Liam Neeson.
You spoke up, rightly so.
I said what she did was wrong.
You're doing it again. Why are you cutting me? Because you know I'm actually hitting a nerve.
No, you're not
Will you stop cutting me then? Because people are not stupid. They can see that. So the bottom line is that you spoke up for Irish people because you knew that they were hurt by what she said, because it was clearly wrong. So when a black person says he was clearly wrong, you're going, oh, it's a bit different. It's like there's no...
It is very different.
How is it different?
Hold on, okay. What she did was intentional. She intended to upset people. Hang on.
Yes.
No, hang on. No, but hang on. He's saying this is something that happened 40 years ago.
Oh, there's a difference.
I don't care.
Hang on. It was a week in his life where he had dark thoughts.
Is that the difference?
Hang on. No, the difference is that he said it was a week in his life where he had dark thoughts. Wait, let me finish. Please let me finish.
My life.
I have never had. Wait a minute. Listen. I am a 53-year-old, soon to be 54-year-old white man. I have never had a second in my life where I've wanted to go round the streets looking for a random black man to kill. Well, I haven't. I'm sorry.
I've never done it either. But
anyone that does that is a murderous intent racist.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. I said on my show recently that if anybody harmed my partner, if anybody harmed my children, I would get a gun and I would go out and put a bullet in their head.
But
I wouldn't. But I'm not a murderer. I wouldn't.
So here we have these two NPCs. So first it's Blackline gets so smug that when white people should react a certain way to Azalea Banks, but that's not true. Some people just don't care. And when you have the example of John Barnes, he reacts a certain way that isn't the same way most people on this panel are reacting to this. I mean, you're collectivizing all black people, and you're doing the same thing that you're accusing. You're being basically saying you as a black man are being accused of. You should feel a certain way, but you're doing the same thing towards white people. So I find it very hypocritical from this guy to say, black people should feel a certain way. No. Individuals should feel on an individual basis. There's no answer to how people should feel to a certain situation. So it's a collectivism fallacy. And Piers Morgan, so high and mighty, he would never react. So if a loved one, it also shows how sheltered it is. If a loved one would be hurt by someone, he would never do anything he might regret or think something might regret. This is just the NPC world we live in.
But you know what it is?
Was he black?
No, but
or African-American?
The first question you ask somebody is, do you remember what they look like?
Yeah, okay. And she identified him as a black man.
Also, and by the way, what if Liam Neeson had said this? If he said, my female friend got raped, And I was so enraged by what had happened to her, I went out to try and find the person that did it. And I had murderous intent, and I feel ashamed of the way I felt. I think we would have all agreed, right?
I think
we'd have all agreed. And the reason I
disagree
disagree with John Barnes, who I greatly respect for his campaigning against racism and indeed for his
100%
brilliance as a footballer.
Yeah.
The reason I disagree with him about this is that I think he has allowed himself to be used as a defensive pawn.
But it's not just...
And here we have the crux of the argument. Piers Morgan says that he's basically an Uncle Tom. And the issue of what Liam Neeson said wasn't what he said, it's how he said it. So even though he clarified it afterwards, I mean, this is NPCs in a nutshell. It's not how it's not what you said, it's how you say it. And basically, John Barnes, he's just a token, and he's being used. Unbelievable.